Hey everybody, what's going on? Dace here, and today we are going to be checking out my casual mode 1cc, or all clear rather, in Rolling Gunner. This is the original version of the game, not with the DLC and all the stuff they added. So yeah, this is a great opportunity for me to kind of just share a little bit about my history with this game. Yeah, I have a bit of a story, and not too many people know about it, but I have touched on it before, like on Twitter and other videos. I've probably offhandedly mentioned it. But anyway, I was really stoked when this game was first announced because it just looked amazing, and I was really into the idea of just the way you control your gun pod, or whatever you want to call it. Because if you're not familiar with the game, you're always shooting forward, the blue shots, but the green shots are what you can aim specifically wherever you want. But the way you do that is you move your ship in the opposite direction of what you want to, what direction you want to shoot. And so if you want to shoot backwards, you move forward, and you can of course lock the position of it by holding down and all this kind of stuff. But it was certainly something that took a lot of getting used to. It felt really, really strange initially. And this game is actually the reason that I purchased my first arcade stick. As much as I loved the Pro Controller at the time for playing everything and using the stick on that, there was just something kind of calling to me saying, like, yeah, you know what? Things are just going to feel better, control way better with a stick. And I did that, and it was like night and day. It was absolutely incredible. I'm not saying you need to go out and get a stick, but that was just what I experienced. So I had not actually, at the time anyway, I think it was about 2 years ago when I was originally playing this, I hadn't done any sort of clears except for the novice mode, because that's yeah, it's easy enough to just kind of rip through that after, yeah, 1 or 2 attempts or whatever, depending on how experienced you are, of course. But for whatever reason, I jumped into expert mode, and after just sampling the game for a little bit, I came up with the idea to just go straight into it without even like playing much or going for just a normal, like, basic 1cc or whatever. I just decided to go expert mode, no bombing allowed, no losing lives, and I can't use my hyper mode. So as you can see, the number 1000 at the bottom, when you collect enough medals, you have your hyper mode at the ready, and you can fire that off. So those conditions, the no miss, no bomb, no hyper, on expert difficulty, that was just absolutely bonkers. And what's crazy is at the time I wasn't even really familiar with the fundamentals. For instance, this boss specifically, in expert mode, there's way more coming at you and all this kind of stuff. But I remember discovering, like, oh wow, I can just make these tiny taps down the screen, like just one tap after another, and I don't get hit. Wow, like, that was mind-blowing to me, because I had no awareness of any of these basic things that, like, now I realize, oh wow, of course you can tap dodge in any shmup you play. Like, why wouldn't you be able to? But for me, it was just the craziest thing to discover. I just felt this huge sense of, wow, like, I just figured out some big secret. Oh my god, look at me. But yeah, it was a blast. So for the most part, the first 2 stages, doing the whole no bomb, no miss, no hyper, those were easy enough on expert mode. It certainly took some figuring out, because you got to really manage your positioning in this game big time, because things can come from any direction whatsoever, and that's a huge part of just why I love this game, just the strategy and the placement and all that. But after that, it's not like I kept practicing full runs or anything. I would kind of sometimes practice a section of stage 3, or I would go to the boss specifically and just practice that, start building bits and pieces of just method, essentially, for different bosses here and there, just seeing where I could get away with certain maneuvers, and just a lot of experimentation. I would do a lot of stuff with experimenting against the final boss, and that was really cool. It was really engaging. I learned a lot at that point in time, even though in ways I had no idea much about how these games work. It was just crazy looking back on my approach and what I was attempting to do without even knowing the basics, essentially. It was just a crazy time. So yeah, anyway. So that's kind of the background. Eventually, I do feel like I burnt myself out quite a bit because, yeah, I'm not sure if you could do the whole game with those limitations. You would have to be extraordinarily skilled because it's just absolutely bonkers. And the TLB, like, that's another story altogether. Like, holy smokes. It's maybe possible, but who knows. But anyway, I didn't keep up with it. I kind of got onto other things because after hours and hours, like tens upon tens upon tens of hours of just practicing and always having to play perfect, I just kind of was like, yeah, I'm just going to do something else. So yeah, like I said, that was 2 years ago. So it's taken a long time to actually develop an interest in coming back to this game. But just a few days ago, I decided that this year I wanted to do some stuff in Rolling Gunner, finally get to it. And so, yeah, casual mode has now been cleared, and I am not sure if I'm going to jump into original mode next. That's the next difficulty up. Obviously that's what's next in line for what I want to accomplish, but I'm not sure if I will just jump into something else and then come back, or if I will just keep at Rolling Gunner right now and just blast on ahead. We'll see. It's quite possible that happens because that's kind of just how I do things. But at the same time, part of me does want to experiment a little bit with jumping around a bit more. Last year was just a wild time, like months just playing Rolling Gunnail because I absolutely loved the game. But at the same time, when I think about locking myself into just one game and not playing anything else, it kind of makes more sense now to just have like a main 1 or 2 games that I gradually chip away at and continue to also play and clear other games, as long as I'm enjoying them, of course. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Anyway, as for this run, it's not like I have too much. Yeah, because like I said, 2 years ago, you don't really remember too much. So there are some really silly fumbles and things like that here and there. But for the most part, it was a really solid run. Probably actually one of the best, to be honest, because I think I no-miss all the way to pretty deep into the game, the run. But I know just even a run or two before this clear, there would be times where stuff like this happens where you're backed against a certain wall and then suddenly a wave of enemies comes behind you and boom, there goes one of your bombs, because you just didn't realize that they were just going to automatically suddenly be there. Like, of course, they indicate with the red light, but sometimes you're not even paying attention to everything that's happening because there's just a lot going on. So this is by no means, like, even though it's my best run so far on this mode, like that was just a silly thing. Even though it's my best so far, it's not like I really know the game. I haven't put much time into learning the game. It's kind of me just jumping in and dodging stuff for the most part and just seeing how well things go. That's more or less all there is to it. There were a few sections where in certain stages where I had a hunch that, okay, you have to not take a hit or use a bomb here and kill a certain enemy to get like a 1-up or a bomb, because sometimes I would not get that stuff at the same place, and usually the only thing I could see that I was doing differently was taking a hit or using a bomb. So I really made an effort to just ensure I was staying on top of that kind of stuff. There might be some other conditions, or maybe I'm way off, who knows, but it worked out in my favor this time with just getting 1-ups and stuff like that, and some bombs here and there, and those make a big difference. So for the most part, casual mode is pretty intense. It's not as though it feels impossible, but I think getting adjusted to it, especially as I mentioned earlier with just the way you move the ship and aim, I remember the first 2 nights jumping back into this. My aim, sometimes it would take a few attempts just to shoot where I wanted to. Sometimes it feels really wonky. So that's something you really got to adjust to when you're playing this version. I'm not exactly sure if they tweaked anything, because it's been a while since I looked into what the Overpower DLC did about the aiming. I think you can pretty much just aim with the other the stick on the Pro Controller, like the right side, and then you move with the left, something like that. I'm not sure. I could be mistaken. I've never purchased it or played it myself, or even really watched it, to be honest, so I'm not sure. But yeah, anyway, for the most part, the stages are a blast, honestly. Every single stage is just a totally different experience, something new, just a fantastic flow thrown at you, and you've just got to sort of puzzle everything out and just find ways and areas where you can just stay on top of the spawning of the enemies, and then the boss fights come in, and they just have awesome attack patterns, one after another, that just keeps everything super interesting. And every single boss feels like a fresh experience. Like some games, you'll jump in and bosses are kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, the last boss did this sort of thing. It's pretty basic stuff. But here, you're always going up against something new, and the amount of different phases or attacks each boss has is just off the charts. It's fantastic. I love it. Some really creative things. Another thing I really enjoy about this game too is just these fantastic scenes between levels. Most of the time you don't really get to see anything when you're playing a shmup, but they really made this game just awesome. They really put some serious effort into it. And I think recently, not too long ago, they shared some sort of footage, like just very preliminary stuff for the new game they're working on. And I'm really stoked, because Roll and Gunner is just such a wicked experience, and I can only imagine what they're going to do next. And yeah, another great facet to the experience here is just being able to capitalize on bullet cancels, like knowing you're going to get one from a certain enemy, and that just adds to the incredible pressure. Sometimes things will be creeping up behind you, and you know, like, oh, I just got to keep firing straight ahead because I'm almost about to get this bullet cancel, and that's going to save me. And then, oh, it's a rush. It is just awesome. And the music, the soundtrack in this game is just fantastic as well. Oh, the game does not let up. Like, I almost ran. That's what I mean. Like, I'm just absentmindedly traveling up into the corner, not remembering that, oh, okay, yeah, there's a wave of dudes that's going to be right there. Just all sorts of wild stuff you just have to face in this and overcome. It just gets better and better. And the enemy variety too is just really cool. I like it a lot. I could honestly just go on and on. The visuals, of course, are really awesome. Oh, man. Plus any game where you just have like thousands of gold medals spilling away just because you can't catch them all is always a fun time. So yeah, we're coming up to one of the parts where I always want to make sure I don't... It's this, yeah, this twin boss. Like, we're gonna see its twin in just a second. Like, how did I not get hit there? Like, what? Oh my god. And again, almost toasted, but thankfully I activated that. For the most part, I went into this kind of thinking... Because if I'm not mistaken, the rank increases when you're using your hyper, and if you use your... There's like 2 layers to it. There's the initial, and then if you collect a certain amount of medals while it's active, you can activate another even stronger thing. But for the most part, I wanted to do as little hypering as possible, at least for the first few stages, and then just, yeah, do everything in my power to just not lose bombs all over the place. Like, oh, that's another thing you got to really watch for in this game. Holy smokes. So here's how it works. If you choose to use a bomb yourself, you have a really long window. It feels like it goes on for 30 seconds. It's just super long, crazy long. But if you don't fire it yourself, but a bullet hits you and you have a bomb, it'll automatically use a bomb. And it's just this really short explosion. In ways it's such a waste. So you gotta watch for that, because sometimes you'll take a hit, your bomb will fire off automatically, and then in no time you're scrambling because you're attempting to figure out like where everything is, what to do, and then boom, there goes your second bomb because you just took another hit, and then a third in like no time whatsoever. So you really gotta pay attention and just learn as much as you can about the flow of the stages, the positionings, like I keep saying, because it's just bonkers, and it's just very easy to be in a very strong position and then just lose a decent chunk of your resources. You're never really in a situation where, yeah, like you're just suffering because like power levels or anything. It's nothing like that. It's mainly just the bombs and lives that can, yeah, just vanish in the blink of an eye. This is a fun boss. Why it had to do the spinning, who knows? Oh man, so good. But yeah, lots of stuff. And even though it may look crazy, it's kind of easy to read when you get used to it. And then it's just a blast, kind of just working with these patterns and flowing around here and there. See, that's an example of firing it yourself. I didn't want to take a chance there, so I just shot that off. Man, it's so cool. And another thing I enjoy too is just, yeah, the patterns that are more of a struggle for each boss. You kind of want to learn how to budget your hypering so that you can kind of speed through as much of that as possible before the attack gets crazy or near the tail end or whatever the situation is. Sometimes there will be moments where the boss is going to, like, it has just finished its one attack and it's about to start its next attack, but there will be a handful of seconds before it actually starts doing anything. So that whole time you can more or less just be just laying on the damage as thick as you can before things actually get super crazy because you're in your hyper mode or your second layer of the hyper mode. Another thing to keep in mind too is the further away you are, the less medals you get. If you're really far away, it might even be where you don't get much of anything. But if you're pretty much point blanking, then you'll just get tons of medals coming out of each boss or enemy. So that's something you want to keep in mind too. And that's what those boss transitions are great for. If you know that you have a few seconds before the boss even does a next attack, you can just be right up in its face, just getting your number as high as you can to hit that 1000 so that you have your safety cushion of the hyper if you need it or want it. So there's just a lot going on in this game. It's just fantastic. Again, just look at these visuals. Really cool scene. So here we are. This stage yesterday night was giving me issues. But then today, all of a sudden, it was just going really, really well. I don't remember exactly if I fumbled much this time around, but I know I had a really, really clean session at one point today. This might even be it. I might have had two, I'm not sure, but kind of just like figuring out the best way to deal with some of this stuff. There were even a few instances, I'll point something out in the next stage, I think it is, where I just experimented with something for the first time, and it just happened to be the first time getting through a part without taking hits and that kind of stuff, or losing lives. I'm not sure. I'll need to see it again to have a refresher. But this is what I'm talking about. Like, this is just fantastic stuff. Like, you gotta be so careful. Surrounded by enemies, and when you destroy them, they, yeah, suicide bullets some stuff your way. And if you don't, then they start firing these those little darts, those purple darts. And this guy's just nasty. I didn't want to be in a hyper because it's, oh my god, I was not taking a chance with that. Normally I'd never hyper for this boss. It's easy to deal with him when you're just, not having everything go crazy, but yeah, it's one of those fumbles where because of other things that happen, you're just going into a situation not like you really want to, but it is what it is. And oh man, another thing that just is crazy about Rolling Gunner, there are plenty of times where you have to back away from the big enemy or the big boss, but you're so close, you don't want to back away because you're so close to hitting your 1000 so that you have your hyper, but you have to because it's getting way too crazy, way too dangerous. And then of course your count just slows down and then comes to a stop or whatever, and it's just like, oh no, like I just really wanted to be able to get that. So yeah, there are some intense times in this game, that is for sure. I'm so stoked to have jumped back in and finally recorded something for this. And sometimes even if bullets aren't close to you, but you just feel like there are too many enemies that you don't even want to start thinking about everything that's going on, you can just hyper it. Oh, nice. Just look at all the gold. This is one of my favorite bosses. Everything from this scene we're seeing here, how it just pans up, we see the planet, just this thing coming from off in the distance, and then boom, it's just there. And look at the design of this thing. This is wicked. It's got some kind of like solar wind panels or something. This, I never take hits during that pattern, but I was just moving around too much for whatever reason. Oh. And this, normally you just want to either be at the top or the bottom and just tap dodge all the way to the opposite. I think I make it out, but that could have been close. It gets messy really quickly if you're not careful with that. This is one pattern that I can do decently, but sometimes it can still trip me up. And then for here, it's a really cool pattern, just seeing this stuff kind of pepper its way out of the the pepper shaker, the salt shaker. Oh, man, just the boss design is so cool. I almost took a hit there, or at least it felt like it. In ways, this kind of reminds me of the Crimson Clover section where you're in that storm and the things are circling you and you got to take them out one by one. Not exactly the same, of course, but just kind of gives me that same feeling where you're just tucked in the middle dodging all these tiny things. Now there is a technique you can do, which I used to use back when I was first playing the game. Not much, because I kind of only discovered it or stumbled upon it near the tail end of my time. But what you can do is you can kind of like... Oh, I forget how exactly it works. I think you activate your hyper... I'm not sure. I don't even remember how exactly. But anyway, the point is you use a bomb right away after doing something, and your total just goes straight up to 1,000 pretty much, because you've just automatically canceled everything on the screen. So it's a great trick that you're pretty much going to want to use if you're doing the harder difficulties. But yeah, I just don't remember all the steps. It's probably something really simple, but yeah, I haven't even really thought about that until yeah, yesterday or today, and it didn't really feel necessary to experiment with that again, because even though this is a fairly challenging difficulty, even though it's called casual, it's It wasn't really the sort of thing that justifies using bombs for that kind of technique. Because you can pretty much stay on top of stuff for the most part anyway. This can be a really nasty stage when you first start making it here, because there's just so much stuff happening. They do not slow down the pace. It's just tanks rolling in from every direction, these turret things that you gotta stay on top of. If you don't prioritize those, like I had a run last night where I focused on some tanks first, and then I was just like, oh, you gotta be joking me, and I was just taking some hits. Always take out the turrets first. Even if it feels risky, that's something I just had to deal with. Even if it felt risky leaving 2 of those blue tanks when the turrets are going, always do the turrets. Get the bullet cancel. Otherwise, you're more likely to just make mistakes. Because then you gotta make your way to the turret when it's in full force, and it's just nuts. I love stuff like this, though. Where you just don't want to mess anything up. And that's another time where the game can just get you. Like, oh yeah, you're finishing up this big enemy, and then these guys come strolling in from the top, right where you are just sitting, completely unaware. Oh, that was so close, but I got it at the last second. Man, that was wild. I think I end up taking a clip of this for Twitter. I'm not sure whether I'll share it or not, because I ended up sharing another one. But yeah. Oh, it's like, why do you end up under the tank? Like, what on earth is going on there? Anyway, here we are with more flying dudes. And we haven't even gotten anywhere in this stage yet. This game goes places, I'm telling you. I really enjoy these enemies too, these like fan-shaped dudes. They're a blast to go up against. So this can be tricky if you're not prepared, or it's so easy to fumble too. I was not having that. I was not going to take a hit to that. I'm just waiting for that guy to die. So yeah, at this point, when I got to this far and still had like all my lives and 2 bombs, I was feeling like, oh, this might actually be the run. Holy smokes. But I do know that the final boss can claim a lot of my resources, that is for sure. But I did have 2 runs before this, like earlier in the day, where I had the TLB down to like 1 inch of health on 2 occasions, and so I knew I was getting close. It was just a matter of really playing well so that I don't lose bombs so early. But man, just the layers of challenge in this game with aiming at things positioned in certain places while other dudes are filtering in, like, it just really, really keeps you thinking and focusing. And speed killing as much as possible. And I love these massive ships here. They're easy to deal with. You just do very, very small taps down or up or whatever. But again, sometimes you're just in a situation where you haven't lined yourself up appropriately, and so you're dealing more with other things or attempting to make it to the tank or the big ship thing. I'm not sure what it is exactly. Some kind of like dreadnought or whatever. Yeah, when in doubt, just hyper it, because it's not worth taking... It's not worth losing bombs and taking hits. Like losing lives, that is. But just, oh man, these patterns are brilliant to look at. And I think I bombed there just because that dude coming down, I didn't want to risk anything. So I said, you know what? We're right at the final boss. I'll just bomb. Oh man. All those components just like moving away. If I'm not mistaken, this is a pretty sloppy fight. Not one of my best. But let's just see how it goes. I am getting better at that section too. It's not so difficult, but it's one of those things where it's so easy to take hits. There's just a lot of stuff happening here. Or sometimes you'll just overshoot your movement. In the past I would use the blue ship, which is the fastest, but what I found is that was just a little too slippery for my liking this time around. And 2 years of experience and whatnot, it's not that I don't use fast ships often in shmups, but I think in Rolling Gunner specifically, I wanted something a little more, something that felt a little more steady for me. Especially for thick patterns where you're more or less staying in one spot, but you just like 1 centimeter, 1 millimeter movements, if that. Just the tiniest things ever. This attack... Oh no, the one after this, yeah, we'll get to it soon. Oh, that was... Oh, I did not like that. When you have a hyper ready and you could have just fired it off instead of losing a bomb. Because that was simple stuff, but whatever. So this attack here is one that I haven't learned whatsoever. Like, it's kind of me just moving around, avoiding things. Like, I know what does what, but it's not like I have any sort of decent strategy. It's kind of just a matter of do my best, and sometimes it's really brutal and I lose like just run through lasers and stuff like that. Like that's just silliness. Absolutely unimpressed with that, but it is what it is. I still have 4 lives, so I'm still well, 3 lives. So I know, like, okay, we got potential with this. We just gotta really not mess stuff up. And that's all there is to it. And he's almost toast. Oh my god. Oh, I was so thankful not to waste another bomb there. And now we just have the TLB. Oh man, get ready for a wild time. So I had forgotten that this thing shields itself when you bomb. You can still shoot it and get a few medals from it, so I'm not sure if it's completely immune while you're bombing or if it just has like 99% immunity, who knows. But you can't just expect that you can do all this damage and use your bombs in that sense, because it's just not going to work. Oh man, that was just nuts. I was actually amazed to get through that. And this time was probably one of the best times I sort of started understanding what was going on with that attack, but I still, yeah. that hit still happened or whatever it was. But then if I'm not mistaken, this right here went pretty decent. I don't think I took a hit. Sometimes you just, yeah, you gotta just be in a fight a few times. The first time you're just kind of taking hits to everything. Then the next time you kind of do okay. And then the third time you start making sense. And then maybe a fourth time, that's when you really feel like, okay, it's not actually as threatening. I just need to keep my cool and just focus, pay attention to where the bullets are and just make the tiny movements. And yeah. Now, this boss's HP goes down slow, so when I'm taking hits like that, losing lives, and I'm seeing how much health there still is, and I know this attack is here now, this is easily one of the weakest, or one of my weakest, just because I have barely any experience with this attack. So I do bomb quite a bit, just to kind of save myself and scrape together whatever few medals I can get here and there before, like, backing away and taking another hit like that. Oh my god. I'm sure it's not as insane as I'm initially thinking it is, but until you kind of figure out the flow or what's going on, it can just pose the issues. But yeah, at this point I know I've got this. And I did that just for the sake of it. If I did lose this life, I still have 3 bombs that are going to go off automatically. So it was pretty much guaranteed. Wow, what a wild, wild ride. And the final scene, this is so cool. Something tells me, ooh, they are not flying home. Wow. Anyway, that is the run. Thank you everyone for sitting here and checking this out with me. I really appreciate that. I had a blast reminiscing and just, yeah, talking all about this game. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. Yeah, I love it. Thanks for being here, and we will see you next time. Take care.